Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to the Fossil Record Podcast. I am your host, Cam the Dino Man. And today, well, first of all, I apologize. I apologize for not posting in February a whole lot. And by a whole lot, I mean like not at all. There was just a lot going on that month. And it appears that schedules have been conflicted, so one of the videos I planned for this month will not be coming until certain things align, which, stay tuned for that episode. I'm really excited. Hopefully I'll be able to get that video or episode done in a couple months. But the topic for this episode is going to be Nanotyrannus, the small or tiny tyrant. First, I'm going to give a brief history because there's a recent development regarding this dinosaur. And by recent, I mean it's like 4-ish months old. It's March, so like in November of last year, I think, a paper came out about Nanotyrannus, and I'll explain some of that later. So, Nanotyrannus was originally described as a species of Gorgosaurus in 1940. In the 1940s, it's either 46 or 49. I can't remember. But late 1940s, and it was originally described as Gorgosaurus, Gorgosaurus lancensis to be specific. And in 1988, people finally got together and were like, oh, wait, no, this is way different from Gorgosaurus. So this is going to be a new species called Nanotyrannus lancensis. And for those of you who don't know, Nanotyrannus, since being described in 1988 as Nanotyrannus, since then it has been caught in a lot of controversy on whether or not it was its own species or just a young version of T.rex, or a juvenile of T.rex, if you will. And that is just, it's been hotly debated for decades. And I myself was one of the people not wanting it, or I will admit, I'm going to confess my ego just a little bit. I didn't want Nanotyrannus to exist. That's not very scientific of me, and I am repenting for that opinion. But the reason why I didn't want it to exist was because I saw a documentary when I was a kid. And that documentary led me astray oh so very much. And that documentary was named Jurassic Fight Club. Now, to be clear, because we live in we live in complicated times, this documentary is one of the worst ones I've ever seen in my life regarding paleontology. It depicts information. The experts that they bring on are edited to high heavens just to fit the narrative of the documentary. And the documentary is basically just like, hey, you know dinosaurs, right? What if they got in a fight? And what if they fought to the death? And it was cool, and it was bloody, and it was sick. And that's basically the whole thing with Jurassic Fight Club. As a kid, I loved this. This was so cool. And then I rewatched it my sophomore year of high school. I rewatched it just for the sake of nostalgia. And I hated it. I really, really hated it. And I'm not a person that hates things very often, but holy crap, I wanted this documentary to burn in a fire. It was so bad. And I of course heard that Nanotyrannus probably wasn't a thing at that time. And when I saw Jurassic Fight Club, that just hammered the nail in the coffin, hammered the final nail in the coffin for me being like, okay, I just want this documentary to be as wrong as possible so I can justify my anger at it. And that's not the way to go about things if you want to be a scientist. So Jurassic Fight Club was my first ever interaction with Nanotyrannus. And aside from getting a whole lot more wrong about that show, or I'm going to call it a mockumentary, what they got wrong, they got so much stuff wrong with that mockumentary. The Utahraptor segment sucked, the Deinonychus segment sucked. It claimed the Deinonychus had the ability and the mental capacity and intelligence to hide their footsteps with thunder. No animal alive today does something like that. It's so incredibly frustrating. And then not to mention, like, the experts are describing a dinosaur called Majungasaurus. Majungasaurus is a very unique and cool dinosaur. It has short legs, a long body, and it's an abelisaur, so it also has tiny, tiny arms and a very, very bulky head. And they describe it as such. It's got short legs and a long body and arms that don't really have elbows. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And then the CGI model of Majungasaurus shows it with a short body and tall legs and arms with elbows. I don't remember if they're grabbing stuff. I don't know. I refuse to watch that documentary anymore. But yeah, it's just frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating. Just the way the information is presented and everything, it's just so bad. So incredibly bad. So aside from getting all of that wrong, surprisingly, they did get Nanotyrannus wrong. And as a human being and aspiring amateur scientist, I am going to walk back my previous statement and say, yes, I do hate Jurassic Fight Club with almost every fiber of my being. But I have to commend them. Their Nanotyrannus model doesn't look all that terrible. It really doesn't. It's a little bit too bulky for my tastes, and I don't think its neck was as short as it depicts in the documentary. I don't know. I'd have to do some more measuring, but from what I can tell based on just looking at it, it seems like its neck is quite short. Either that or it's just incredibly bulky. And so yeah, Jurassic Fight Club depicts Nanotyrannus. It's fine. That segment still has a few things wrong with it, but I'm not gonna focus on that because it doesn't really involve Nanotyrannus. But yeah, so that's my first ever interaction with it. And I got into several arguments. I used to work at a dinosaur park when I was in high school, and I was like, oh yeah, no, Nanotyrannus definitely doesn't exist. And then I finally had people who were intelligent enough to walk me through why I thought that. And so I was able to kind of do a reflection and be like, well, it's because of these reasons. And they're like, okay, well, here are the reasons why I think Nanotyrannus might exist. And surprisingly, I was in the minority there. Most other people at the dinosaur park actually believed Nanotyrannus might exist. I think I was either the only one or one of the only ones there that believed it didn't exist. And that really opened my eyes and made me be able to be like, okay, well, what if it is real? Then what do I think about that? And this is also kind of not only a story about Nanotyrannus, but like a growth of my acceptance of scientific knowledge. It's kind of tacky, and I'm going to try and focus as much on Nanotyrannus as I can in this episode. But yeah. So Nanotyrannus, for a long time, on and off, was considered to be, oh, maybe it is a juvenile T-Rex. Oh, well, maybe it's its own thing. And that's just kind of where the arguments kept going. And then, 4 months ago, in 2025, two paleontologists and a few more, but the main ones on the paper, I believe, were Lindsay Zano and James Napoli, or Napoli. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I apologize. They came out with a paper talking about Nanotyrannus and its validity, meaning it does exist, definitely. For a few key reasons about that. And James Napoli actually has, he runs a YouTube channel with some of his other paleontology buddies called The Skeleton Crew. And he posts he posted a few videos about Nanotyrannus and their discovery. I'll probably remember to link those videos in the description if you guys want. They're really informative, though I do question sometimes Lindsay Zano. She doesn't put a whole lot of confidence, or her name alone doesn't really put a whole lot of confidence in me, but the paper is very thorough and the paper is very convincing. And the arguments that it makes are very convincing. And I'll go through some of those arguments right now. The original reason why people kept thinking, oh, well, maybe it's a young T-Rex. Oh, well, maybe it's just a Nanotyrannus. Usually, when two people like that got together, they could usually agree and count on agreeing on one thing. And that one thing was the fact that they, either whatever it is, it's a juvenile. It is a juvenile of whatever it is. Whatever it ends up being, it's a juvenile. And it wasn't until, I believe, the Fighting Dinosaurs, which is a Triceratops and now confirmed Nanotyrannus lancensis, locked in combat and died together in near perfect articulation, if I remember correctly. It's a beautiful fossil. And what I believe was that after they were done studying it, they were like, oh, wait a second. This is smaller than the holotype. This individual is smaller than the holotype, but it seems to be an adult. And so they did a bit more studying that I don't exactly understand just yet, and stuff that I kind of just glossed over because I don't understand it. That's probably not what I should have done. But it appears that we were wrong. The Nanotyrannus bones that we have are not juveniles. They are adults, which is kind of cool to think about, because it kind of shows, like, oh, we were looking at the wrong things, and we also were using techniques that don't usually... Sorry, I paused to regather my thoughts. My brain was it was scattering everything all over the place. So basically, we were using older techniques to find out whether it was a juvenile or not. Using more modern techniques, we found out that the Nanotyrannus bones we have are not juveniles, they are adults. Which also brings into question, I want to bring up real quick, my brother actually brought this up to me once I started thinking about it more. He's like, well, what if it's just a Tyrannosaurus Rex with dwarfism? And I was like, that is an interesting question. And then I actually started looking into dwarfism and the genetics that kind of go into it. And dwarfism isn't just shrinking of the body, nor is it just like you look like a normal person being small. So dwarfism is a morphing of the bones in a very, 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 very simplistic way of explaining it. Dwarfism is, at least in humans, you take someone with dwarfism, they don't look like a normal person just shrunken down. All their proportions are different, and I don't really know how to describe it. But if you look at this, if you look at the skeleton of the average human being versus someone with dwarfism, you'll notice that their skeletons look a lot more different, and we'd be able to see that in the Nanotyrannus bones, and we just don't. Some more differences between Nanotyrannus and T.rex is that Nanotyrannus, I can't believe, like, a lot of us just glossed over this fact. Nanotyrannus has more teeth than T.rex. It just has more teeth. I don't remember the exact counting, but if you go to a museum that has a Nanotyrannus and a T.rex mounted, like the museum that I volunteer at, Nanotyrannus does have more teeth. And not only does it have more teeth, the teeth are a different shape. It's minor to the point where most people just won't be able to detect it. But if you're actually like looking into it and studying it, then you can actually notice that, oh, these are a different shape. They're growing to different lengths. They're not getting as absurdly big as T-Rex's. But it's also becoming a lot more blade-like, a little bit more like a... I don't know the comparison, but I heard another podcast guy that was interviewing Pete Larson, and they were talking about it before the paper came out. Well, Pete Larson was more or less talking about his opinion on the matter, and his opinion, at least this time, turned out to be right. Another thing that I have noticed, especially looking at the skeletons at the museum that I volunteer at, the Ogden Dinosaur Park in Ogden, Utah, Nanotyrannus also appears to have more tail vertebrae. I can't remember exactly how much more tail vertebrae, but it has more tail vertebrae. And it's also got proportionally longer arms than T-Rex at its smaller size. So that would be like a child having that would be like having a 5 to 10-year-old child having the arms of a full-grown man. And then the child grows up, and the arms change with it, and then the arms shrink, and then they start growing again. At least that's how it was explained to me. I could be very wrong about that, which in turn, that also brings up a very good point. If I ever get any of my information wrong in this podcast, or if any of my information is just like, it needs a little bit of correction, please feel free to politely correct me in the comments. I am human, and I make mistakes a lot of times, especially because I am currently the only one working on this podcast. And all of that leads me to the final thing, which I think is probably one of the coolest things about this, is that with all of these obvious differences, like the ones that I just named, or obvious being relative, with all of that being said, I should also mention that with the teeth and the vertebrae, along with the arms, like, a lot of the stuff wouldn't change when the animal grows up. Like, it just wouldn't change. It's like, you don't just grow teeth and then lose teeth and then never grow those teeth again. At least not as a dinosaur. So there's that, and then there's also tail vertebrae. You don't lose tail vertebrae as you grow up. That's not something that any animal does. And it's I don't know. I find that kind of cool and important to note. But finally, the last piece of thing that they just discovered in the paper, or not discovered in the paper, but were discussing their findings in the paper, is that Nanotyrannus might actually not belong to the family Tyrannosauridae, which is where it was previously assigned to, and it was thought to be with T.rex, Daspletosaurus, Gorgosaurus, Albertosaurus, Zooching-Tyrannus, Lythranax, Teratophonius, all of those, and so many more, which it's not even a Tyrannosaurid, or at least I want to emphasize it might not be a Tyrannosaurid. Dr. Napoli on the Skeleton Crew YouTube channel pointed out that is one of the findings that they found. They did that research a bunch of different times, and that was one of them that they found. So there is evidence to suggest that it might not be a Tyrannosaurid, but that doesn't mean for sure that it isn't. It could be a very, very weird Tyrannosaurid, but it is worth noting that one of the studies that they did kind of points at the fact that it might not be one. Which I think is really cool. And the coolest thing about this whole thing that I think is so amazing, cool, and awesome is that they didn't just find one species. They didn't just confirm one species. They discovered that Nanotyrannus is not only valid, but it has 2 species under its name. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I'm going to use this for reference, T.rex is the only dinosaur that is famous, at least in the pop culture, that is known by its genus name and its species name, its generic and specific name. Tyrannosaurus is its generic or genus name, but Rex is the specific or species name. So saying Tyrannosaurus rex would be almost equivalent to saying Panthera leo, the lion. So with that being said, there are 2 species within Nanotyrannus. So the difference between these 2 species would be very similar to the difference between a lion and a tiger. So Panthera leo and Panthera tigris. These 2, the first one that we found and discussed, we discussed earlier, is Nanotyrannus lensensis. But with this new paper, they described the second species, Nanotyrannus lethaeus. Now, they named it Lethaeus as a reference to the Greek river in the underworld, not the river Styx, but the river Lethe. And the river Lethe, if you bathe in it, if I'm remembering the myth correctly, if you bathe in the river of Lethe, your memories of your previous life are washed away, and that in turn can lead you to be reincarnated. And they chose that as kind of like a poetic thing for Nanotyrannus coming back, which I think is kind of cool. But yeah, there are 2 species. So we have 2 species of Nanotyrannus that were living together, and because they're different species, they were probably different colors and different patterns. Very similar to like the difference between a leopard, a lion, and a tiger, and a snow leopard. And jaguars look very similar to leopards, but that is another thing to point out, that they could be very similar in pattern, but they also might be different colors and different patterns. But we don't know that for sure. That's just a fun thing to hypothesize about. And that is my brief recap about Nanotyrannus. If you want a little bit more in-depth from one of the authors of the paper, I will remember to link the Skeleton Crew's video in the description below. And as always, feel free to recommend podcast episode ideas in the comments. And also remember to, if you liked, please press like. If you want to subscribe, please subscribe. And I shall see you guys in the next episode.